up and welcome to the video. Let me just start by saying Happy New Year. And this product on the table is the 2023 14-inch MacBook Pro M3 Max in space black. And I know that's a lot. And honestly, we were initially hesitant to upgrade to the M3 Max just because our current laptops, which were the M1 Max, 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pro respectively, were still performing so well, even after having them for going on 3 years now. But we went ahead and pulled the trigger. So let's talk about what's new with the M3 lineup and ultimately whether or not it's going to be worth your money to upgrade. And I don't want my message here to be taken the wrong way. I'm not trying to say that the M3 lineup of MacBooks are not good. It's more so that the M1 lineup, specifically the M1 Max, which we've been using as daily drivers here in the studio for quite some time, they were such capable computers that it makes the idea of upgrading year over year a little less enticing. And I think that was kind of the whole point whenever it came to things like Apple Silicon. Now, to be completely honest with you, our entire YouTube channel's workflow is currently done on a 14-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro. Everything from editing 4K ProRes video to color grading to exporting in DaVinci Resolve and making thumbnails in Adobe Photoshop are all handled on a 14-inch MacBook Pro. And we go through that entire workflow with absolutely no issues. Now, it has been a couple of generations worth of spec bumps now, and not to mention, I'm very superficial, and the space black MacBook color looks absolutely fantastic. So we went ahead and pulled the trigger, and the main idea behind this video is focusing on what Apple has improved now that we've had a couple of years worth of spec bumps. From an external perspective, everything is essentially exactly the same. So if you own a MacBook from 2021, basically whenever the M1 chips came out, this computer is going to look exactly the same, outside of one new addition, and that is the color choice. So the M3 line of MacBook Pros are still available in silver and space gray, but Apple finally dropped the new color, space black, which I think looks fantastic. And from an overall build quality perspective, the MacBook Pro still feels incredibly solid. It's all metal, so it feels really nice in the hand. Everything feels really well built. Keyboard is fantastic. All the ports and stuff are the same. The only thing I wish Apple would have added, in addition to the new color, is Face ID to the notch on top of the display, because the notch is still there. It's not really a big deal, but it's still just housing a pretty tiny 1080p webcam. So it would have been cool to see Apple add Face ID, but at least we have a new color option. The build quality is fantastic, and everything about it from a build perspective is still really, really solid, even after a couple of generations of retaining essentially the same external design. Sticking with the theme of what Apple has kept the same, before we get to the differences, which the differences are mainly going to be internal. We've already touched on it a little bit, but the display on the M3 line of MacBook Pros is essentially what we've seen for the past couple of generations now, but it's still worth mentioning because it is a fantastic display in its own right. I mean, it's sitting at a near 4K resolution, XDR, so the colors and brightness are absolutely fantastic on it, and it still comes with that buttery smooth 120 Hz Pro Motion refresh rate. So all in all, this is a fantastic display that's still being used for going on 3 generations now, but I can't fault Apple. It's one of those classic situations of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Now, of course, your biggest changes are going to be internally whenever it comes to these MacBooks. There are 3 new Apple Silicon chips that we should be taking a look at: the M3, the M3 Pro, and the M3 Max. And whenever you take a look at Apple's website, they love to throw these big numbers out there in terms of the performance improvements that they've made. But you really have to be a little careful whenever you're taking a look at those numbers, because whenever you dive a little deeper, you'll notice that Apple is doing a lot of its comparisons not to the M2 or the M1. They're actually comparing it to previous MacBooks that had Intel level processors, specifically the Intel Core i7. Now, for our particular use case scenario, we took this M3 Max MacBook Pro on the table and we compared it to our current M1 Max MacBook Pro that is essentially running the entire YouTube channel. This has the top-of-the-line M3 Max processor with 48 gigabytes of unified memory, and our MacBook Pro that's running the channel has the top-of-the-line M1 Max processor with 32 gigabytes of unified memory. We took a 2-minute 8K ProRes video shot on a Red camera, and we did some color grading, added some transition work, and exported it. And the M3 Max MacBook Pro was able to export about 4 seconds faster than the M1 Max. And that 4-second difference in export time was really just the difference between a 16-second export on the M1 Max versus a 20-second export on the M3 Max for that 2-minute 8K video. Then we wanted to try one of our own projects that we have here on the channel, a 10-minute review shot in 4K with all sorts of cuts and edits put in between, and the export difference between M3 Max and M1 Max was about 2-ish minutes faster on the M3 Max. So really, whenever it comes to performance differences between something like M1 Max and M3 Max, your biggest differences are going to be in graphics-intensive workflows, things like 3D rendering and simulations. If you have those types of graphics-intensive workflows on a day-to-day basis, that is where the M3 Max is really going to shine compared to previous models. But outside of that, general day-to-day performance or more CPU-intensive tasks, they're much closer of a race whenever you take a look side by side. And honestly, if the performance numbers are a little underwhelming for you, I think the one thing that we can all celebrate here is that the 2023 M3 lineup of MacBook Pros officially ushered out the Touch Bar 13-inch MacBook Pro, which whenever that MacBook Pro existed with the M2, there was always a little bit of a awkward stage between the MacBook Airs and the MacBook Pros. Like you could get a MacBook Air with an M2, or for a very similar price, you could get a 13-inch MacBook Pro with M2 with Touch Bar. But for me personally, I'm not gonna miss the Touch Bar. And if you enjoyed it, I'm sure you can find yourself some fantastic deals now that that laptop is officially being phased out of Apple's lineup. But I think that basically brings us to the end of our M3 Max MacBook Pro review. There's a lot with these MacBooks in terms of colors, options, price points. The 14-inch MacBook Pro with just the regular M3 starts at $1,600, and the 16-inch MacBook Pro starts at $2,500. Now, the reason why there's such a major jump is not just because of the difference in screen size. You're also jumping from M3 as your base to M3 Pro as your base on the 16-inch. And in some cases, these MacBooks can expect all the way past $7,000. Like my particular Mac here on the table, M3 Max, 48 gigs of unified memory, 1 terabyte of storage, is $3,700. So whether or not you want to upgrade to the M3 line of MacBook Pros is really going to come down to you evaluating your day-to-day workflow and really deciding which processor is going to fit you best. I'm willing to bet for the vast majority of people out there, the regular M3 and the M3 Pro is going to be sufficient for all of your daily workflow. There are very, very specific use case scenarios where you'd probably need to jump to the M3 Max, but just know that if you do, it's going to come at the Apple Premium, of course. So, if you enjoyed that review, consider hitting the like and subscribe button down below, especially if you're new here. Leave a comment, let me know what you think. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Our YouTube channel's workflow is currently done on an M1 Max MacBook Pro. Everything from editing 4K ProRes video, to color grading, to exporting in DaVinci Resolve, to creating thumbnails in Adobe Photoshop. It's all handled on a 14-inch MacBook.